An overwhelming majority of Americans support term limits for Congress, with polls by Pew Research and McLaughlin showing at least 83% think it's necessary from both sides of the aisle. Well, joining us this morning to discuss the CEO of the nonprofit U.S. Term Limits, Nick Tomboulides. Good morning to you, Nick. Good to see you.
Good morning, Jen.
So your group is working to get a constitutional amendment passed for term limits. How would that work, and what set of terms are you proposing for Congress?
Well, term limits is the one issue I think that everyone agrees on, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. And it's easy to see why, because we have people who run for Congress and, they say it's a swamp, and then they get there and they realize it's more like a hot tub. They get cozy, they get comfortable, they never want to come home, they become career politicians. We've got people like Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi who've been in Congress longer than I and many Americans have been alive. It's simply unacceptable, and the results have been a disaster. So in terms of how it would work, it would be just like the term limits that we have for the president, for most governors, for state legislators. At a regular period, we're saying 6 years for the House. You throw the bums out, you get somebody new faces, new ideas, new perspectives, people who can change the system before it changes them.
Well, critics say we already have term limits. They're called elections. How do you answer that?
I hear that out of people in Washington all the time, and honestly, I think they're just trying to save their own bacon because they know better. These incumbents, they get reelected 98% of the time, even though they have a 10% approval rating. It's obviously a very broken and very rigged system. They have tens of millions of dollars they're sitting on. They know how to keep real competition away. In fact, the only way you get real elections is through term limits, because then you're guaranteed that open seat every 6 years or so.
But it would require Congress. So is it really feasible to think Congress would ever term limit themselves?
Not too feasible, because chickens don't tend to vote for Colonel Sanders, as you know. But when we look at American history, there have been many constitutional amendments that Congress has refused to pass, and we've actually forced their hand by going through the state level. You go to the state capitals and you pass these resolutions for a constitutional amendment. Typically, they're called convention resolutions, and then you can force Congress to propose something. It's been done with many amendments in the past, including presidential term limits. And we're doing the same thing here for congressional. So it is true that without pressure, Congress won't do it, but we can apply that pressure through the states.
Well, tell us about the progress that you've made so far.
Sure. Yeah, we're organizing in all of the state capitals, and we haven't been doing it for very long, but we've already gotten 9 states to pass these resolutions for congressional term limits. We've got a lot more on the way. We're looking this year at South Dakota. Their state house just passed this. The Indiana State Senate just passed this.
Okay.
We're alive in Georgia, South Carolina, Ohio, Arizona, many other states this year. And as we get more and more of these states signed up behind the congressional term limits resolution, it really ratchets up that pressure on Congress to do something, because they don't want to leave this to the states. They're going to have to preempt the states and propose that amendment themselves.
So you've already got some states on board with you there. I want to ask you very quickly, you were talking about some of the signs we've seen lately in our Congress, the aging Congress. You mentioned Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell. There are those who say we need age limits, not term limits. What do you say to that?
Right. I think people are correct when they say Congress is the world's most expensive assisted living facility. In fact, we actually find members of Congress who have been living in assisted living facilities and not doing their jobs as of late. It's extremely alarming. Age limits is a great idea as well. We have it for many other professions. Here in Florida, where I live, we do it for judges. Airline pilots have age limits, many other professions. So that's a good idea. But term limits is a better idea because it's proven. We see how it works with the president. We see how it works with governors. With term limits, you're really making it more about competency rather than age, because there are some older people who are doing a great job. There are also some younger people who don't know what they're doing. So with term limits, it's more about attacking the corruption and the incumbency rather than age.
CEO of U.S. Term Limits, Nick Tomboulides. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it.